Step into History Page, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings timeless mysteries to life. In the eerie silence of Dartmoor's mist-shrouded moors, a single gunshot shatters the dawn, felling Sir Reginald Haverford in a chilling act of murder. Who pulled the trigger in the secluded Hunter's Lodge, where secrets lurk in every shadow? Was it the elegant Lady Eleanor, hiding rage behind her poised facade? The charming artist Victor Langston, whose passion for her burns too brightly? Or the fragile Clara Winthrop, desperate to save her future? As Hercule Poirot unravels a web of clues, a silk thread, a Turkish cigarette, a hidden rifle, each guest's lies unravel, but the truth remains elusive. Can Poirot's little grey cells pierce the fog of deception before another life is lost? Dive into a tale of love, betrayal, and murder, where every detail holds a deadly secret. The Lodge in the Wilderness. The late autumn sun dipped low over the rugged expanse of Dartmoor, casting long shadows across the heather-strewn hills. Hunter's Lodge, a sprawling granite manor nestled in a secluded valley, stood resolute against the encroaching dusk, its chimneys puffing wisps of smoke into the chill air. The estate, owned by the wealthy and reclusive Sir Reginald Haverford, was a place of austere beauty, surrounded by dense woods and jagged tors. To the casual observer, it promised rustic charm and solitude, but to those gathered within its walls on this October evening of 1925, an undercurrent of unease simmered beneath the veneer of civility. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, gazed out of the mullioned windows of the lodge's drawing-room, his thoughts drifting to the peculiar circumstances that had brought him here. Sir Reginald, a retired industrialist with a penchant for hunting and an aversion to society, had invited a small party to his remote retreat for what he termed a weekend of sport and reflection. Hastings, who had met Sir Reginald briefly during the war, had been surprised to receive the invitation, extended through a mutual acquaintance, the affable but vague Dr. Malcolm Price. The inclusion of Poirot, however, had been a condition of Hastings' acceptance, for he knew his friend's singular talent for unraveling human complexities would enliven what promised to be a rather staid affair. The drawing-room was a study in contrasts. Heavy oak furniture gleamed with polish, while the fire in the massive stone hearth crackled with warmth. The guests, an eclectic assembly of Sir Reginald's acquaintances, mingled with the forced politeness of strangers bound by obligation. Sir Reginald himself, a broad-shouldered man of 60, with a weathered face and piercing grey eyes, stood near the fireplace, regaling his guests with tales of his latest hunting. Striking woman, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her green eyes sharp and watchful. Hastings noted the way her gaze flickered toward her husband, a mixture of affection and something less definable, resentment, perhaps. She wore a silk gown of deep emerald, which seemed out of place in the rustic setting, as though she belonged to a grander stage. Across the room, Dr. Malcolm Price, a wiry man with a nervous laugh, was engaged in conversation with Miss Clara Winthrop, Sir Reginald's niece. Clara, a pale young woman of 25, had a delicate beauty marred by a perpetually anxious expression. Her hands twisted in her lap as she listened to Dr. Price's animated chatter about the medicinal properties of Dartmoor's flora. Hastings wondered what had brought her to the lodge. She seemed ill at ease, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting an unwelcome arrival. Completing the party were two men of markedly different temperaments. Mr. Lionel Grayson, a solicitor from London, was a stout, balding man in his 50s, his pince-nez perched precariously on his nose as he scribbled notes in a leather-bound journal. His presence, Hastings gathered, was tied to Sir Reginald's business affairs. though the man's dour demeanour suggested he found little pleasure in the weekend's festivities. In contrast, Mr. Victor Langston, a dashing young artist with a shock of dark hair and a roguish smile, seemed entirely at home, charming the room with anecdotes of his travels in Italy. His easy manner, however, did not escape Hastings' notice. There was a calculated edge to his charm, as if he were performing for an audience. The final member of the party, Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, the lodge's housekeeper, hovered at the edges of the room, her stern face betraying no emotion as she directed the servants. Her grey hair was pulled tightly into a bun, and her black dress gave her the appearance of a mourner. Hastings found her presence oddly unsettling, though he could not pinpoint why. As the clock on the mantel struck 7, Sir Reginald clapped his hands, calling the group to attention. "My friends," he began, his voice booming, "tonight we dine, but tomorrow we hunt. The moors are alive with game, and I trust you'll find the sport invigorating. But for now, let us enjoy the warmth of the lodge and the company of good friends." The words were hearty, but Hastings detected a strain in Sir Reginald's tone, a tightness around his eyes that belied his joviality. The man's gaze lingered on his wife for a moment too long, and Hastings wondered what lay beneath the surface of this carefully curated gathering. Dinner was a lavish affair, served in the oak-panelled dining room under the watchful eyes of mounted stag-heads. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, her eyes fixed on her plate, while Dr. Price waxed eloquent about the benefits of fresh air. Grayson, ever the solicitor, steered the conversation toward Sir Reginald's recent acquisition of a neighbouring estate, a topic that seemed to irritate the host. Langston, meanwhile, flirted shamelessly with Lady Eleanor, earning a sharp glance from Sir Reginald. As the meal drew to a close, Sir Reginald rose, glass in hand. "A toast," he declared, "to Hunter's Lodge and the secrets it keeps." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who had been uncharacteristically silent throughout the meal, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. The little Belgian detective, immaculate in his evening suit, sipped his wine with a faint smile, his mustache twitching as if in amusement. "Secrets, mon ami?" Poirot murmured to Hastings as they retired to the drawing-room. "Mais oui, this lodge is full of them. Observe, Hastings, the way the eyes avoid one another, the hands that fidget, the words left unsaid. There is a story here, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall uncover it." Hastings nodded, though he felt a prickle of unease. The lodge, for all its grandeur, seemed to close in around them, its shadows deepening as the firelight flickered. The guests dispersed to their rooms, their footsteps echoing in the stone corridors. Hastings lingered, watching Poirot as he paced the drawing-room, his fingers steepled in thought. "Something troubles you, Poirot," Hastings ventured. Poirot turned, his eyes gleaming. "Troubles, Hastings? No, not troubles. Possibilities. This place, it is like a puzzle, each piece carefully placed, but one piece is missing, and I must find it before it is too late." As Hastings bid his friend good night and ascended the creaking staircase to his room, he could not shake the feeling that the weekend at Hunter's Lodge would be anything but restful. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked, a lonely, mournful sound that seemed to echo the secrets Poirot had sensed. In his room, Hastings noted the time, 10:15 p.m. He jotted it down in his notebook, a habit he had picked up from Poirot. Every detail, the detective had once told him, could be significant. As he extinguished the lamp and settled into bed, the darkness seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the lodge itself were waiting for the inevitable.
And so the stage was set. The players were in place, their motives and secrets hidden beneath polished exteriors. Hunter's Lodge, with its ancient walls and whispering woods, held its breath, unaware that by morning a tragedy would unfold, and Hercule Poirot's little grey cells would be called upon to unravel a mystery
carrying the scent of damp earth and pine, as the guests assembled in the courtyard for the much-anticipated hunt. Captain Arthur Hastings, bundled in a tweed jacket, stood among them, his breath visible in the chill morning air. The mood was one of forced enthusiasm, the party's earlier tensions masked by the bustle of preparation. Sir Reginald Haverford, resplendent in hunting attire, issued commands to the gamekeeper, a wiry man named Bates, whose weathered face betrayed a lifetime spent on the moors. Hercule Poirot, however, was conspicuously absent. Hastings had knocked on his friend's door at 6:30 a.m., only to find Poirot still in his dressing gown, sipping coffee, and declaring that the hunt for game is of little interest to Hercule Poirot, mon ami. I prefer to hunt the truths hidden in the human heart. Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's eccentricities, had left him to his contemplations, promising to relay the morning's events. The hunting party consisted of Sir Reginald, Lady Eleanor, Dr. Malcolm Price, Victor Langston, and Lionel Grayson. Clara Winthrop had declined to join, citing a headache, and remained in the lodge with Mrs. Tuttle. As the group set out, rifles slung over shoulders, Sir Reginald led the way, his stride purposeful, his voice booming instructions. "We'll head toward Black Tor," he announced. "Plenty of pheasant there, and perhaps a stag if we're lucky." Hastings noted the time, 7 a.m. The group moved through the misty woods, their footsteps muffled by the carpet of fallen leaves. Lady Eleanor walked with a distracted air, her eyes scanning the trees rather than the path. Dr. Price chattered nervously about the local wildlife, while Grayson trudged along, muttering about the dampness of his boots. Langston, ever the charmer, attempted to engage Lady Eleanor in conversation, but her responses were curt, her attention elsewhere. They reached a clearing near Black Tor at 7:45 a.m., where Bates suggested they spread out to flush out game. Sir Reginald, with a gleam in his eye, took a position near a rocky outcrop, his rifle at the ready. Hastings, stationed some 20 yards away, kept an eye on the group, his military instincts alert. The air was still, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird. At precisely 8:03 a.m., a single gunshot shattered the silence. Hastings froze, his heart pounding. The sound was sharp, deliberate. Not the erratic report of a hunter's shot, but something more sinister. He turned toward the source, near Sir Reginald's position, and saw the man stumble, clutching his chest. Blood bloomed across his tweed jacket, vivid against the muted greens and browns of the moor. "Reginald!" Lady Eleanor screamed, her voice piercing the morning air. The group converged on the outcrop, chaos erupting. Dr. Price, with surprising agility, reached Sir Reginald first, trembling as he checked for a pulse. He's gone. Hastings, his mind racing, noted the time, 8:05 a.m. Sir Reginald Haverford, the indomitable master of Hunter's Lodge, lay dead, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. The rifle he had carried lay discarded a few feet away, unfired. The wound, a single bullet to the heart, suggested a marksman's precision. "Who fired that shot?" Grayson demanded, his voice shrill. "We were all spread out. Did anyone see?" Langston, pale but composed, shook his head. "I was on the other side of the clearing. I heard it, but I didn't see anything." Lady Eleanor, trembling, clutched her shawl. "It came from over there," she said, pointing vaguely toward a cluster of trees. Her face was ashen, but her eyes held a strange intensity, as if she were searching for something, or someone. Bates, the gamekeeper, emerged from the trees, his face grim. "I was checking the traps," he said gruffly. "Heard the shot. Came running." Didn't see no one, Hastings. His thoughts turning to Poirot, took charge. We must return to the lodge at once and send for the police. Bates, stay with the body. The rest of you come with me. The group trudged back in stunned silence, the weight of the tragedy settling over them. Lady Eleanor leaned on Langston's arm, her composure fraying. Dr. Price muttered about shock and trauma, while Grayson scribbled furiously in his journal, as if documenting the moment would bring clarity. Hastings, his mind sharp despite the shock, noted their positions at the time of the shot. Lady Eleanor, 20 yards to Sir Reginald's left, Langston, 30 yards to the right, Grayson, near Hastings, and Dr. Price, somewhere in the middle, though his exact location was unclear. They reached the lodge at 8:45 a.m., where Clara Winthrop and Mrs. Tuttle awaited them. Clara gasped at the news, her hands flying to her face. Uncle Reginald? Dead? It can't be. Mrs. Tuttle, stoic as ever, merely nodded and began issuing orders to the servants to prepare tea, as if routine could restore order. Hastings sent a servant to the nearest village to fetch the police, then sought out Poirot, who was in the library, engrossed in a volume of local history. Poirot, Hastings said urgently, Sir Reginald has been shot. He's dead. Poirot closed the book with a deliberate snap, his eyes narrowing. Shot, you say? Mon Dieu, Hastings, this is no accident. Tell me everything. Hastings recounted the morning's events, detailing the positions of the party, the single gunshot, and the reactions of the guests. Poirot listened intently, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. A single shot, precise to the heart, he mused. This is not the work of a stray bullet, Hastings. This is murder.
Mustache twitched. Interesting. Very interesting. And the others? Where were they exactly at 8:03 a.m.? Hastings hesitated. It's hard to be certain. The clearing was large, and the mist was thick in places. Lady Eleanor was closest, I think, but she seemed as shocked as anyone. Langston was farther off. Grayson was near me, and Dr. Price, well, he was somewhere in between. Poirot rose, his movements precise. We must go to the scene, Hastings. The police will come, but they will trample the evidence with their big English boots. Hercule Poirot must see the truth before it is disturbed. They arrived at Black Tor at 9:30 a.m., where Bates still stood guard over the body. The police had not yet arrived, and the scene remained untouched. Poirot knelt beside Sir Reginald, his gloved hands hovering over the body without touching it. He examined the wound, the position of the rifle, and the surrounding ground. The bullet entered here, he said, pointing to the chest. A clean shot from some distance, I think. The angle suggests it came from slightly above, perhaps from those trees. Hastings followed Poirot's gaze to the cluster of oaks Lady Eleanor had indicated. Poirot moved toward them, his eyes scanning the ground. He paused, crouching to pick up a small object, a cigarette stub, its end slightly damp. Curious, he murmured, slipping it into a handkerchief. And this footprint, Hastings. See how it is pressed deeply into the earth, as if someone stood here for some time. The footprint, partially obscured by leaves, was large and distinct, suggesting a man's boot. Poirot marked its position with a stick before continuing his inspection. He noted the alignment of the trees, the line of sight to the outcrop, and the absence of any other obvious clues. This was no accident, he said firmly. Someone stood here, waited, and fired. But who? And why? As they returned to the lodge, the police arrived. A local inspector named Hargreaves, a burly man with a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to Hastings' account, then began questioning the party. Lady Eleanor, now composed, reiterated her story, insisting she had seen nothing. Langston and Grayson offered similar accounts, while Dr. Price seemed flustered, his alibi vague. Bates, gruff as ever, claimed he had been too far to see anything. Poirot, standing silently to the side, observed each speaker with the intensity of a hawk. "The truth, Hastings," he whispered, "lies not in what they say, but in what they do not say. We have only begun to unravel the secrets of Hunter's Lodge." The morning wore on, the lodge now a hive of suspicion and grief. Hastings, watching Poirot's methodical movements, felt a familiar thrill. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot was already piecing together the puzzle of
The weight of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder settling over its inhabitants like a fog rolling in from the Dartmoor moors. By 10:30 a.m., the lodge's drawing room had become a makeshift headquarters for Inspector Hargreaves, who bustled about with the officious energy of a man determined to assert control. His constables, two young men with notebooks, took statements from the shaken guests, while Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, stood quietly by the fireplace, his sharp green eyes missing nothing. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever Poirot's steadfast companion, observed his friend with a mixture of admiration and impatience. Poirot's calm demeanour, so at odds with the chaos around them, was both reassuring and maddening. The inspector, with his booming voice and blunt questions, seemed to believe the case would be solved by sheer force of inquiry. But Hastings knew Poirot's methods relied on subtler means. The careful observation of human nature, the detection of inconsistencies in word and deed. Inspector Hargreaves, having dismissed Bates back to his duties, now turned his attention to the guests assembled in the drawing-room. Lady Eleanor Haverford sat rigidly on a velvet upholstered chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her auburn hair, slightly dishevelled from the morning's ordeal, framed a face pale but composed. Beside her, Victor Langston leaned casually against the mantel, his dark eyes watchful, his earlier charm subdued but not entirely absent. Dr. Malcolm Price fidgeted with his spectacles, his nervous energy palpable, while Lionel Grayson, the solicitor, sat with his journal open, scribbling notes with a precision that rivaled Poirot's own. Clara Winthrop, Sir Reginald's niece, occupied a corner of the room, her delicate features drawn, her eyes red-rimmed from tears. Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, the housekeeper, stood near the door, her stern expression unchanged, as if death were merely another inconvenience to be managed. "Mr. Poirot," Inspector Hargreaves said gruffly, acknowledging the detective for the first time. "I understand you're something of a sleuth in London. Care to share your thoughts on this business?" Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching slightly. "Monsieur l'Inspecteur, I am but a humble observer. However, I am at your disposal, should you wish the assistance of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells." Hargreaves grunted, clearly unimpressed. "Right then. Let's have order. I want everyone's account of this morning, starting with you, Lady Eleanor." Lady Eleanor straightened, her voice steady but low. "As I told Captain Hastings, I was in the clearing about 20 yards from my husband. I heard the shot at precisely 8:03. I noted the of words. "And you saw no one, madame? No movement in the trees? No figure retreating?" "None," she replied firmly. "The mist was thick in places, and I was focused on Reginald." Hargreaves turned to Langston, who shrugged with an air of nonchalance. "I was on the far side of the clearing, nearer the path we took from the lodge. I heard the shot, same as everyone, but I was too far to see anything clearly. I ran towards Sir Reginald when I heard Lady Eleanor scream." "And you, Doctor?" "Price," Hargreaves pressed. The doctor adjusted his spectacles, his hands trembling slightly. "I was, in the middle of the clearing, I suppose. I was watching a pair of larks, fascinating creatures, you know, when the shot rang out. I didn't see who fired it, but I reached Sir Reginald within moments. The wound was fatal, I'm afraid. A single bullet, straight to the heart, Grayson, without looking up from his journal, spoke next. I was near Captain Hastings, perhaps 10 yards away. I heard the shot and saw Sir Reginald fall, but the trees blocked my view of anything beyond. I assumed it was an accident at first, a stray shot, perhaps. Poirot interjected softly. And yet, Monsieur Grayson, you are a man of detail. Did you not notice anything unusual? A sound, a movement, a discrepancy in the scene? Grayson's pen paused, and he looked up, his eyes narrowing. Nothing specific, Mr. Poirot. It all happened so quickly. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Clara, who had been silent. Mademoiselle Winthrop, you remained at the lodge. Did you hear or see anything from here? Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. I was in my room, resting. I heard nothing until the others returned and told me about Uncle Reginald. She buried her face in her hands, and Dr. Price moved to comfort her, his manner solicitous. Mrs. Tuttle, when questioned, stated curtly that she had been overseeing breakfast preparations in the kitchen, with the servants as her witnesses. The lodge was quiet, she said. No one came or went until the hunting party returned. Hargreaves scribbled in his notebook, then turned to Poirot. Well, Mr. Poirot, any brilliant deductions yet? Poirot smiled faintly. It is too early for deductions, Inspector. But I have observed much. The cigarette stub, for instance, found near the trees where the shot originated, and the footprint, deep and deliberate. These are pieces of the puzzle, no? We must now find how they fit. Hargreaves frowned. A cigarette and a footprint. That's hardly evidence. Could belong to anyone, poachers even. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone light, but his eyes sharp. But slowly. This murder is a work of precision. The shot, the timing, the choice of location, all suggest a mind that plans. But the motive, that is where we must look. Tell me, what did you observe in the drawing room just now? Hastings hesitated, marshalling his thoughts. Lady Eleanor seemed composed, but there's something guarded about her. Langston's too casual, almost as if he's hiding something behind that charm. Dr. Price is nervous, more than I'd expect from a doctor used to crises. Grayson's obsessed with his notes. And Clara, she's genuinely distraught, I think. Mrs. Tuttle's like a statue, unreadable. Poirot nodded approvingly. Bien, Hastings, you see, but you do not yet observe. The eyes, the hands, the pauses in speech. These tell the story. Lady Eleanor, for instance, speaks of her husband's death with precision, yet her hands betray her calm. Langston's ease is too studied, as if he performs for us all. And Dr. Price, his nerves are not those of a man surprised by death, but of one who fears discovery. Hastings frowned. You think they're all lying? Not all, perhaps, Poirot said, his fingers steepled. But each conceals something. We must learn what. Come, let us examine the lodge itself. The scene of the crime is not only the moor, but the hearts within these walls. They began a methodical inspection of the lodge, starting with Sir Reginald's study, a room lined with books and hunting trophies. Poirot examined the desk, where papers were neatly arranged, save for a single letter, half-written, addressed to Grayson. It mentioned the revision to Sir Reginald's will, but the details were incomplete. Curious, Poirot murmured. A man writes of his will on the eve of his death. Coincidence, Hastings? Next, they visited the gun room, where Sir Reginald's rifles were stored. All were accounted for, save the one found beside his body. Bates, summoned to explain, confirmed that no rifles were missing, and none showed signs of recent use beyond the morning's hunt. Poirot's eyes lingered on a small case of ammunition, noting that the bullets matched the type used in the fatal shot. By noon, they returned to the drawing room, where the guests remained under Hargreaves' watchful eye. Poirot requested a map of the clearing, which Bates provided, a rough sketch showing the positions of the hunting party at 8:03 a.m. Poirot studied it intently, his finger tracing the line from the trees to the outcrop, where Sir Reginald had stood. The shooter, he said softly, knew precisely where Sir Reginald would be. This was no random act. As the day wore on, the lodge buzzed with whispers and suspicion. Hargreaves announced that no one was.
Library is like a tapestry. We have the threads, the cigarette, the footprint, the letter, but the pattern remains hidden. We must be patient, for the killer will reveal themselves, not in words, but in the silence between them. Hastings, glancing at the clock, 12:35 p.m., felt the weight of Poirot's words. The lodge, with its secrets and shadows, was a stage, and Hercule Poirot was ready to unmask its players. Chapter 4. The Interrogations Begin. The afternoon sun cast feeble rays through the leaded windows of Hunter's Lodge, doing little to dispel the chill that had settled over its inhabitants. By 1:15 p.m., the drawing room had become a crucible of tension, with Inspector Hargreaves presiding over the formal questioning of the guests. His broad frame loomed at the center of the room, his notebook open, his questions blunt and unyielding. Hercule Poirot, however, sat unobtrusively in a high-backed chair near the window, his notebook balanced on his knee, his pencil moving with the precision of a metronome. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated beside him, marveled at Poirot's ability to appear both detached and intensely focused, his green eyes scanning each speaker as if reading the subtext of their souls. The inspector began with Lady Eleanor Haverford, whose composure had hardened into a mask of icy resolve. "Lady Eleanor," Hargreaves said, his tone formal but edged with suspicion, "you were closest to your husband when the shot was fired. You say you saw nothing, but surely you noticed something, a rustle, a shadow, anything at all." Lady Eleanor's green eyes met his without flinching. "As I told you, Inspector, the mist was thick, and my attention was on Reginald. I heard the shot at 8:03 a.m. I checked my watch instinctively. I saw him fall and I ran to him. That is all." Her voice was steady, but Hastings noticed her fingers tighten around the arm of her chair, the knuckles whitening. Poirot interjected softly, his tone deferential yet probing. "Pardon, madam, but a small detail. Your watch, did you set it that morning, or is it your habit to check it regularly?" Lady Eleanor blinked, momentarily thrown. I set it last night, as always. It's a habit Reginald insisted upon. Punctuality was important to him." Poirot nodded, jotting a note. "Merci, madam. A precise woman is a treasure in such matters." Hargreaves moved on to Victor Langston, whose casual demeanor had taken on a defensive edge. "Mr. Langston, you claim you were on the far side of the clearing, some 30 yards away, yet you were quick to reach Sir Reginald's side. Quite a sprint for an artist, wouldn't you say?" Langston's smile was tight. "I'm fitter than I look,
A few yards, Poirot tilted his head, his voice gentle. "Monsieur Langston, you are an artist, no? A man who sees the world in detail. Did you perhaps notice the ground where you stood? Was it disturbed, as if someone had passed by?" Langston hesitated, his eyes flickering toward Lady Eleanor. "The ground? I don't recall. It was muddy, I suppose, but I wasn't studying it." Poirot's pencil paused, and Hastings caught the faintest quirk of his moustache, a sign that Langston's response had piqued his interest. Dr. Malcolm Price was next, his nervous energy more pronounced under Hargreaves's scrutiny. "Dr. Price, your account is vague," the inspector said, flipping through his notes. "You were somewhere in the middle of the clearing, watching birds? Can you be more specific?" Price adjusted his spectacles, his hands trembling. "I was near a small copse, about 15 yards from Sir Reginald. I was distracted, lurks, as I said. I heard the shot and ran to him. I'm a doctor, Inspector. My instinct was to help." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "And as a doctor, monsieur, you confirmed the death immediately. Did you examine the wound closely? The angle, perhaps, or the type of bullet?" Price flushed. It was a clean shot, through the heart. "I didn't have time to study it. My concern was whether he could be saved. He couldn't." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, merely noting the time, 1:45 p.m. Lionel Grayson, the solicitor, answered with the precision of a man accustomed to legal scrutiny. "I was near Captain Hastings, as I said. I heard the shot, saw Sir Reginald fall, but the trees blocked any view of the shooter. I assumed it was an accident until we saw the wound." "And you were writing in your journal even then?" Poirot asked, his tone curious. Grayson adjusted his pince-nez. "I always take notes, Mr. Poirot. It's my habit to record details, times, observations, anything that might be relevant." "A commendable habit," Poirot said, though his smile suggested he found it more intriguing than commendable. Clara Winthrop, questioned next, was a study in fragility. "I was in my room," she whispered. "I didn't hear anything until the others returned. I can't believe Uncle Reginald is gone." Her voice broke, and Dr. Price moved to her side, offering a handkerchief. Poirot's gaze softened, but his question was precise. "Mademoiselle, you were close to your uncle, yes? Did he seem troubled in the days before this tragedy? A word, a gesture, perhaps?" Clara hesitated, her eye.
"Until the party returned. The servants can confirm it. I heard nothing, saw nothing. And yet," Poirot said, his voice almost playful, "you see much, Madame Tuttle. The comings and goings of this house, nothing escapes your notice, I think." Her lips tightened, but she said nothing, merely nodding as Hargreaves dismissed her. As the interviews concluded at 2:30 p.m., Hargreaves announced that the coroner would arrive by evening to examine the body, and no one was to leave the lodge. The guests dispersed, their faces etched with unease. Poirot, however, remained in the drawing room, beckoning Hastings to join him by the window. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, his voice low, "the interrogations have revealed much, but not in the words spoken. It is the silences, the hesitations, that speak loudest. Lady Eleanor's precision is too perfect, as if rehearsed. Langston's charm conceals calculation. Dr. Price's nerves suggest guilt, but of what? Grayson's notes are a shield, and Mademoiselle Clara, her grief is real, but there is fear beneath it. As for Madame Tuttle, she sees all, but reveals nothing." Hastings frowned. "You think they're all hiding something?" "Mais oui," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Each has a secret, and one of those secrets is murder." We must now examine the lodge more closely, the study, the bedrooms. There are clues here waiting to be found. They began with Sir Reginald's bedroom. a masculine space dominated by a four-poster bed and a heavy oak wardrobe. Poirot examined the contents meticulously, noting a locked box in the wardrobe. With Hargreaves' permission, they opened it, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. Most were business correspondence, but one, dated a week prior, was from Clara, pleading with her uncle to reconsider a decision that will ruin us all. Poirot tucked the letter into his pocket, his expression unreadable. They inspected Lady Eleanor's room, where Poirot found a small vial of sleeping draught on her bedside table. "Interesting," he murmured. "A woman who claims to sleep soundly, yet requires assistance." In Langston's room, they found a sketchbook filled with drawings of the Moors and one of Lady Eleanor, her likeness captured with startling intimacy. Poirot raised an eyebrow but said nothing, moving on to Dr. Price's room, where a medical bag contained the usual instruments plus a small bottle of digitalis, a heart medication. "Curious," Poirot noted, "for a man who claims no knowledge of Sir Reginald's health." Grayson's room yielded little beyond his meticulous journals,
His notes, including the map of the clearing, the cigarette stub, the footprint, and Clara's letter. "The puzzle takes shape, Hastings," he said. "The shooter stood in the trees, yes, but the motive lies here, in the lodge. A letter, a vial, a sketch, these are the threads of our tapestry." As the afternoon waned, the lodge seemed to close in, its shadows lengthening. Hastings, watching Poirot's methodical mind at work, felt the stirrings of anticipation. The questions had begun, but the answers lay ahead, hidden in the secrets of Hunter's Lodge. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings Emerge. The clock in the great hall of Hunter's Lodge struck 4:30 p.m., its chimes echoing through the stone corridors like a somber knell. The atmosphere within the lodge had grown taut, the guests' nerves fraying under the weight of suspicion and confinement. Inspector Hargreaves, fortified by a cup of strong tea, continued his dogged investigation, his questions growing sharper as he sought a clear culprit. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a quiet presence, his keen eyes observing the interplay of glances and gestures among the assembled party. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, felt the tension mounting, sensing that the case was about to take a turn toward the deceptive. Hargreaves, having concluded his initial round of interviews, now focused on what he believed to be a promising lead. Bates, the gamekeeper, had reported a troubling discovery, a rifle hidden in a hollow tree some 50 yards from the clearing where Sir Reginald Haverford had been shot. The weapon, a .303 Lee Enfield, bore traces of recent use, and its discovery sent a ripple of excitement through the inspector's team. "This is it," Hargreaves declared, holding the rifle aloft in the drawing room, where the guests had reconvened at 5 p.m. "This is the murder weapon, I'd wager, and it points to someone who knows these woods well." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Lady Eleanor Haverford, seated with her hands folded tightly, raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting one of us hid it there, Inspector?" "We were all in the clearing when it happened." "Not all," Hargreaves countered, his gaze settling on Bates, who stood near the door, his weathered face impassive. "You, Bates, were off checking traps by your own account. Convenient, wouldn't you say, to be away from the group when the shot was fired?" Bates bristled, his hands clenching. "I've served Sir Reginald for 20 years, Inspector. I'd no reason to harm him. I found that rifle, didn't I? If I'd shot him, why'd I lead you to it?" Poirot, who had been examining the rifle with a handkerchief to avoid smudging any prints, interjected softly. "A point well made, Monsieur Bates. But tell me, this hollow tree—" Snares when I saw the tree. The rifle was tucked inside, wrapped in a cloth. I brought it straight to the inspector. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as skepticism. "And this cloth? Where is it now?" Hargreaves produced a coarse burlap sack, stained with mud. "Here it is. Nothing special about it. Could belong to anyone." Poirot examined the sack, noting a faint monogram in the corner. R.H. He said nothing, merely folding it carefully and handing it back. "A most interesting find, Inspector. But let us not be too hasty. A rifle in a tree is a clue, oui. But it may be a distraction." Hargreaves scoffed. "A distraction. It's evidence, Mr. Poirot, and it points to someone with access to the estate, someone like Bates." The accusation hung in the air, and Hastings noted the reactions. Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. Victor Langston's eyes flickered with interest. Dr. Malcolm Price shifted uncomfortably, and Lionel Grayson scribbled furiously in his journal. Clara Winthrop, pale and silent, seemed to shrink further into her chair, while Mrs. Agnes Tuttle's expression remained unreadable. Determined to press his advantage, Hargreaves turned to the guests. "Let's go over your alibis again. Any of you could have slipped away, fired the shot, and hidden the rifle before rejoining the group. Mr. Langston, you were quick to reach Sir Reginald. Perhaps too quick?" Langston's smile was strained. "I told you, Inspector. I ran when I heard the scream. I'm not a marksman, and I've no reason to kill Sir Reginald. We barely knew each other." "And you, Doctor Price?" Hargreaves continued. "Your story about watching larks is flimsy. A doctor would know how to aim for the heart, wouldn't he?" Price's face reddened. "That's absurd. I was trying to save him, not kill him. I've no skill with rifles. I'm a physician, not a soldier." Poirot, listening intently, interposed with a gentle question. "Dr. Price, you mentioned digitalis in your bag. Was Sir Reginald under your care for any heart condition?" Price blinked, caught off guard. "No, he wasn't. The digitalis is for general use. Some of my patients in the village require it." Poirot nodded, his expression neutral, but Hastings knew his friend had filed away the response for later scrutiny. The inspector's attention shifted to Grayson. "And you, Mr. Grayson, always writing in that journal, what exactly are you recording? Plans, perhaps? Sir Reginald was revising his will. Did that concern you?" Grayson adjusted his pince-nez, unruffled. "I record facts, Inspector." "Interesting," Poirot murmured, making a note. As the questioning continued, Poirot excused himself, beckoning Hastings to follow. They stepped into the corridor, where Poirot's demeanor shifted to one of quiet urgency. "Hastings, mon ami, the rifle is a red herring, placed to mislead. The monogram R.H. suggests it belonged to Sir Reginald himself, yet his rifle was found beside him, unfired. This second rifle, someone wishes us to believe it is the murder weapon, but I suspect otherwise." Hastings frowned. "But the traces of use? Surely it was fired recently." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but not necessarily at Sir Reginald. We must examine the bullet recovered by the coroner when it arrives. For now, let us explore another avenue, the relationships within this lodge." They returned to Sir Reginald's study, where Poirot re-examined the half-written letter to Grayson. "This mention of a will," Poirot said. "It is incomplete, but it hints a change. Who stood to gain from Sir Reginald's death? And who feared to lose?" Their search led them to the servants' quarters, where Poirot requested to see Mrs. Tuttle's locked drawer, which Hargreaves had opened with a skeleton key. Inside, they found a ledger detailing the lodge's expenses, meticulously kept, but also a small photograph of a young man in military uniform, inscribed, "To Agnes, with love, 1916. Poirot's eyes softened. A son, perhaps, lost in the war. This explains her severity, Hastings. Grief hardened into duty. At 6 p.m., they joined the guests for a tense dinner, served in the dining room under Mrs. Tuttle's watchful eye. The conversation was stilted, punctuated by long silences. Lady Eleanor, seated at the head of the table, picked at her food, her eyes distant. Langston attempted to lighten the mood with a story of his travels, but it fell flat. Clara excused herself early, claiming fatigue, and Dr. Price followed, offering to check on her. Grayson continued his note-taking, while Bates, invited to dine with the guests at Hargreaves' insistence, ate in silence, his gaze fixed on his plate. Poirot, ever observant, noted the time, 7:15 p.m. He leaned toward Hastings, whispering, "Observe, mon ami, the way Lady Eleanor avoids Langston's gaze, yet he watches her closely. And Dr. Price, his concern for Mademoiselle Clara is more than professional, I think." After dinner, Poirot requested a private word with Clara in the library. She entered hesitantly, her hands twisting a handkerchief. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began gently. "Your letter to your uncle spoke of decision," Poirot pressed. "Who else knew of it?" Clara hesitated. "I told Dr. Price, in confidence. He's been kind to me. I don't know if anyone else knew." Poirot thanked her, his mind clearly racing. As she left, he turned to Hastings. "Zinette Titans, Hastings. A rifle to mislead, a letter to reveal motive, and now a confidant who knows too much. The red herrings multiply, but Hercule Poirot sees through them." By 8 p.m. the lodge was quiet, the guests retreating to their rooms under Hargreaves' orders. Poirot, however, remained in the library, his notes spread before him. "The truth is near, Hastings," he said, his voice low, "but we must tread carefully, for the killer is watching, and they are clever." Hastings, glancing at the clock, felt the weight of Poirot's words. The lodge, with its secrets and shadows, was a maze of deception, and the red herrings were only the beginning. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The evening shadows deepened over Hunter's lodge, cloaking its stone walls in a somber hush as the clock struck 8:30 p.m. The air inside was heavy with suspicion, each guest retreating into their own thoughts, wary of the others. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere, sat in the library, his small notebook open, his pencil tracing patterns only he could discern. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever loyal, stood by the fire, watching his friend's meticulous process with a mixture of awe and impatience. The discovery of the rifle had stirred the investigation, but Poirot's quiet confidence suggested he had found something more significant, a detail that would unravel the tangled threads of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. Poirot closed his notebook with a deliberate snap and rose, his eyes gleaming. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, his voice low. "The rifle in the tree is a distraction, oui, but it has served a purpose. It has drawn our attention to the woods and in doing so, revealed a clue most subtle. Come, we must return to the scene of the crime." Despite the late hour, Poirot insisted on revisiting Black Tor, where Sir Reginald had fallen. Inspector Hargreaves, skeptical but curious, agreed to accompany them, bringing a constable with a lantern to light the way. The moor was shrouded in darkness, the mist curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. They reached the clearing at 9:15 p.m. The rocky outcrop where Sir Reginald had stood, now marked by a makeshift barrier of stones. Poirot knelt beside the outcrop, his gloved hands probing the ground with care. "Here," he said, pointing to a small patch of earth near the base of the rock.
Replied. "A shot to the heart, from a distance, in the mist. This requires skill and stability. The footprint we found earlier near the trees was deep, suggesting someone stood for some time. But this mark, c'est différent. It speaks of preparation." The constable's lantern illuminated a faint indentation, 3 small points forming a triangle, barely visible in the damp earth. Poirot measured it with a small tape from his pocket, noting the dimensions. "A tripod, or perhaps a makeshift stand," he murmured. This was no impulsive act. Hargreaves, grudgingly impressed, ordered the constable to mark the spot for further examination. Poirot, however, was not finished. He moved to the cluster of oaks where the cigarette stub and footprint had been found, his eyes scanning the ground. "Here," he said, pausing at a tree with low-hanging branches. "A thread, caught in the bark. Blue silk, I think." He plucked the thread with tweezers, holding it to the light. "This is not the coarse fabric of a gamekeeper's coat, nor the tweed of a hunter. This is fine, elegant, perhaps from a lady's garment." Hastings glanced at Poirot, recalling Lady Eleanor's emerald silk gown from the previous evening. "You think Lady Eleanor was in the trees?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "I think, Hastings, that the lodge holds many secrets, and this thread is but one. We must return and observe further." Back at the lodge by 10 p.m., Poirot requested a private meeting with Lady Eleanor in the library. She entered, her posture regal, but her eyes wary. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice cool, "I trust this is important. I'm exhausted." "Forgive the intrusion, madam," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "A small matter. This thread, blue silk, caught in the trees near where the fatal shot was fired. Does it remind you of anything?" Lady Eleanor's face remained impassive, but her hand twitched. "I own many silk garments, Mr. Poirot, as do others, I'm sure. I was in the clearing, not the trees, as I've said." "Of course," Poirot said, his tone polite. "And yet, the trees are close. The mist was thick. A step or two, perhaps, in the confusion." Her eyes narrowed. "I resent the implication, Mr. Poirot. I loved my husband, despite our differences." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, madam. I seek only the truth." As she left, Hastings whispered, "You're pushing her, Poirot. Do you really think she's involved?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I think, Hastings, that everyone is involved until proven otherwise. But come, let us examine another detail, the cigarette stub." In the privacy of the library, Poirot produced the stub, wrapped in his handkerchief. "This is no common cigarette, Hastings. The paper is fine, important."
"Monsieur Langston. He has the air of a man who enjoys exotic tastes." Hastings nodded, recalling Langston's flamboyant demeanor. "You think he was in the trees, smoking before the shot?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps someone wishes us to think so." The stub was damp, suggesting it was discarded shortly before we found it. But why leave such a clue, unless to mislead? Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Dr. Malcolm Price entered, his face pale. "Mr. Poirot, I must speak with you. It's about Clara. She's distraught, and I'm worried for her health." Poirot gestured for him to sit. "Monsieur le Docteur, your concern is admirable. But tell me, this digitalis in your bag, why carry such a drug if Sir Reginald had no heart condition?" Price fidgeted, his spectacles slipping. "It's standard for my practice. Some patients require it, As I said, I didn't use it on Sir Reginald. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And yet you were quick to pronounce him dead. Did you check for signs of poisoning, perhaps? Digitalis in excess can mimic a heart wound's effects. Price's face reddened. I'm no murderer, Mr. Poirot. I examined the wound. It was a bullet, plain and simple. Poirot nodded, dismissing him gently. As Price left, Poirot turned to Hastings. The doctor protests too much, no? His nerves betray him. But the clue of the moment is the tripod mark. It tells us the killer planned, waited, and aimed with precision. This was no crime of passion. At 11 p.m., Poirot and Hastings joined Hargreaves in the dining room, where the coroner's preliminary report had arrived. The bullet, extracted from Sir Reginald's body, matched the .303 rifle found in the tree, but no fingerprints were found on the weapon. A clean job, Hargreaves said, frustrated. Someone wiped it down. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Or never touched it with bare hands. Gloves, perhaps, or a cloth, like the one with the monogram R.H. Hargreaves grunted. You're full of theories, Mr. Poirot, but I'm betting on Bates. He knows the woods, had the opportunity, and that rifle was hidden where only a local would think to look. Poirot shook his head. Patience, Inspector. The rifle is a lure, meant to point to Bates or another. The true clue is in the details, the thread, the tripod, the cigarette. They tell a story of calculation, not haste. As the night deepened, Poirot retired to his room, but not before instructing Hastings to note the time. 11:45 p.m. Sleep, Hastings, he said, but keep your eyes open. The killer is among us, and they grow restless. Hastings, lying awake in his room, replayed the day's discoveries. The tripod shadows seemed to whisper of secrets, yet to be uncovered. As Hastings drifted to sleep, he felt the weight of Poirot's words. The truth lay in the details, and one detail, small but vital, would soon bring the mystery into focus. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The second morning at Hunter's Lodge dawned cold and gray, the Dartmoor mist clinging to the windows like a shroud. By 7 a.m., the household stirred uneasily, the weight of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder pressing heavily on its inhabitants. The dining room, where breakfast was served, was a tableau of strained civility, the clink of cutlery and murmured pleasantries barely masking the undercurrents of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his morning suit, sipped his coffee with an air of serene focus, his sharp eyes noting every glance and gesture. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated beside him, felt the tension in the room like a physical force, each guest a potential player in a deadly game. Inspector Hargreaves, fortified by a night's rest, resumed his investigation with renewed vigor, his focus still on Bates the gamekeeper and the rifle found in the hollow tree. Yet Poirot, ever attuned to the subtleties of human behavior, sensed that the truth lay not in the obvious clues, but in the secrets now beginning to unravel. The previous day's discoveries, the tripod mark, the silk thread, the Turkish cigarette stub, had set his mind in motion, and he was determined to probe deeper into the relationships and motives within the lodge. As breakfast concluded at 8:15 a.m., Poirot requested a private audience with each guest, beginning with Victor Langston. The young artist, his roguish charm dimmed by fatigue, met Poirot in the library, his posture defensive. "Monsieur Langston," Poirot began, his voice smooth, "you are a man of observation, an artist who captures the essence of his subjects. The sketch of Lady Eleanor in your room, it is most intimate. Tell me, what is your connection to her?" Langston's eyes flickered, but he maintained his composure. "She's a striking woman, Mr. Poirot. I sketched her as I would any subject. There's nothing more to it." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet, your eyes follow her, monsieur. At dinner in the drawing room, your attention is marked. Was Sir Reginald aware of your admiration?"
Langston's jaw tightened. If you're implying an affair, you're mistaken. Sir Reginald and I got on well enough. He admired my work, even commissioned a painting of the lodge. Poirot nodded, his gaze piercing. And this painting, where is it now? In my room, Langston said. It's unfinished. I was working on it yesterday before the hunt. Poirot made a note. Merci, monsieur. I may wish to see this painting. As Langston left, Hastings whispered, You think he's lying about Lady Eleanor? Not lying, perhaps, Poirot replied, but
admits. And Sir Reginald's death may have removed an obstacle. We shall see. Next, Poirot summoned Dr. Malcolm Price, whose nervous demeanor had only worsened. The doctor entered, adjusting his spectacles, his hands fidgeting. Dr. Price, Poirot said, your concern for Mademoiselle Clara is touching, but it raises questions. Her letter to Sir Reginald spoke of ruin. Did she confide in you about this decision of her uncle's? Price hesitated, his eyes darting to the door. She did, in confidence. Sir Reginald planned to sell the lodge and alter his will, leaving Clara with little. She was devastated. She depends on his support. And you, Poirot pressed, how did this affect you? As her confidant, did you feel compelled to act? Price's face flushed. Act? You mean kill him? That's preposterous. I'm a doctor, Mr. Poirot. I save lives, not take them. Poirot's smile was faint. Of course, monsieur. But the digitalis in your bag, such a drug could be used to harm, no? Did Sir Reginald ever consult you about his health? Price shook his head vigorously. Never. He was fit, robust. I had no reason to treat him. Poirot dismissed him, noting the time, 9:30 a.m. The doctor is too anxious, Hastings, he said. His concern for Clara is genuine, but there is guilt in his eyes. Not of murder, perhaps, but of something. Their next interview was with Lionel Grayson, the solicitor, whose dour expression belied his meticulous nature. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot began, Sir Reginald's letter to you mentioned a revised will. What changes did he propose? Grayson adjusted his pince-nez, his voice measured. He wished to redistribute his estate. The details were vague. He mentioned providing for Clara, but reducing her share, and ensuring Lady Eleanor was secure. He also spoke of a charitable bequest, but we hadn't finalized anything. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And who stood to lose from these changes? Grayson hesitated. Clara, potentially. And there were rumors of debts. Sir Reginald's business ventures weren't as successful as he claimed. Poirot made a note. Debts, you say? Most interesting. And you, monsieur, as his solicitor, did you advise against these changes? I advised caution, Grayson said, but Sir Reginald was stubborn. He wanted control, even in death. As Grayson left, Poirot turned to Hastings. Debts, Hastings. A new thread in our tapestry. Sir Reginald's wealth was not as secure as it seemed. This gives motive to many. At 10:45 a.m., Poirot spoke with Clara Winthrop, whose fragile demeanor was now tinged with defiance. Much the lodge meant to me. It's my home, my security. And Lady Eleanor? Poirot asked. Did she know of these plans? Clara nodded. She and Uncle argued about it. I overheard them 2 nights ago in the study. She was furious, said selling the lodge would ruin her social standing. Poirot's pencil paused. Furious, you say? Merci, mademoiselle. As Clara left, Poirot summoned Mrs. Tuttle, the housekeeper, whose stern presence seemed to anchor the lodge's chaos. Madame Tuttle, he said, you are the eyes and ears of this house. Did you hear this argument between Sir Reginald and Lady Eleanor? Mrs. Tuttle's lips tightened. I don't eavesdrop, Mr. Poirot, but I heard raised voices 2 nights ago, around 10 p.m. Lady Eleanor was upset, yes. She left the study in tears. And Sir Reginald? Poirot pressed. "Did he seem troubled?" "He was angry," she said curtly. "He locked himself in the study afterward. I didn't see him again until dinner the next night." Poirot thanked her, noting the time, 11:30 a.m. As she departed, he turned to Hastings. "The lies surface, Hastings. Lady Eleanor concealed this argument. Langston hides his feelings. Price protects Clara. Grayson knows of debts, and Clara fears ruin. Each thread points to motive, but which leads to murder?" At noon, Poirot requested to see Langston's painting. The unfinished canvas, propped in Langston's room, depicted Hunter's Lodge against the moors, its details vivid but incomplete. Poirot studied it closely, noting a figure in the foreground, a woman in a green gown, resembling Lady Eleanor. "Curious," he murmured. "This was painted before the murder, yet it captures her essence perfectly. A man in love, perhaps?" Hargreaves, meanwhile, remained fixated on Bates, summoning him for another round of questioning. The gamekeeper's alibi, checking traps at 8 a.m., held, but his gruff demeanor and knowledge of the woods kept him under suspicion. Poirot, however, seemed unconvinced. "Bates is too obvious, Hastings," he said. "The killer is cleverer, weaving a web of deceit." By 1 p.m., the coroner confirmed the bullet's trajectory, fired from the trees, likely from a tripod or rest, as Poirot had deduced. The absence of fingerprints on the rifle deepened the mystery. Poirot, undeterred, returned to the library, spreading out his notes. The tripod mark, the silk thread, the cigarette stub, Clara's letter, the will, the argument, the painting. "The picture forms, Hastings," he said. "A crime of passion, perhaps, but planned with cold precision. The lies are the key. Each conceals a truth we must uncover."
Turning point. The second afternoon at Hunter's Lodge descended into a heavy stillness. The weight of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder, pressing down on the household like the grey clouds gathering over the Dartmoor moors. By 2 p.m., the guests had retreated into their private worlds of suspicion and fear, their interactions marked by strained silences and guarded glances. Hercule Poirot, ever the calm centre in the storm, sat in the library, his notebook filled with meticulous observations, his mind piecing together the intricate puzzle of motives and clues. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the window, watched the wind whip through the trees, sensing that the investigation was approaching a critical juncture, a moment where the facade of civility would crack, revealing a truth long buried. Inspector Hargreaves, undeterred by Poirot's subtler methods, continued to focus on Bates, the gamekeeper, whose gruff demeanor and familiarity with the woods made him an easy target. Yet Poirot, with his unerring instinct for human nature, believed the key to the mystery lay not in the obvious suspect, but in the emotional undercurrents now surfacing among the guests. The clues, the tripod mark, the silk thread, the Turkish cigarette stub, Clara's letter, the unfinished will, the overheard argument, and Langston's painting, had woven a complex tapestry. But it was the human heart, Poirot knew, that would unravel it. At 2:30 p.m., the tension in the lodge reached a breaking point. The guests had been summoned to the drawing room for another round of questioning, and the air crackled with unease. Lady Eleanor Haverford sat rigidly, her emerald eyes fixed on a point beyond the room, her composure a fragile mask. Victor Langston leaned against the mantel, his usual charm replaced by a restless energy. Dr. Malcolm Price fidgeted with his spectacles, his nervous glances darting toward Clara Winthrop, who sat pale and trembling, her handkerchief twisted in her hands. Lionel Grayson, the solicitor, scribbled in his journal, his face impassive, while Mrs. Agnes Tuttle stood by the door, her stern presence a silent rebuke to the chaos. Bates, summoned from his duties, hovered at the edge of the group,
his weathered face set in defiance. Hargreaves, pacing before the fireplace, brandished a new piece of evidence, a small brass button found near the tripod mark in the clearing. "This," he declared, "was discovered this morning by my constable. It's from a man's coat, likely a hunting jacket. Care to explain, Bates?" Bates scowled, crossing his arms. "Not mine, Inspector. I wear canvas, not fancy brass buttons. You're barking up the wrong tree." Poirot, seated quietly, raised a hand. "If I may, Inspector, a question for Monsieur Bates. This button, does it resemble any you have seen on the coats of the hunting party?"
Bates head green, with buttons like that. Saw him wearing it yesterday. All eyes turned to Langston, whose face flushed. "My coat," he said, his voice sharp. "I wore it for the hunt, yes, but I didn't lose a button. This is ridiculous." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And yet, Monsieur Langston, you were in the clearing, no? Near the trees, perhaps, where the silk thread was found? A thread, I note, that matches the shade of Lady Eleanor's gown." Lady Eleanor's head snapped up, her composure cracking. "Are you accusing me, Mr. Poirot? I told you, I was nowhere near those trees." The room fell silent, the accusation hanging like a thundercloud. Clara Winthrop, her voice trembling, broke the tension. "Stop it, all of you!" she cried, rising from her chair. "This is unbearable. Uncle Reginald is dead, and you're tearing us apart with these questions. I can't stay silent any more." The guests froze, their eyes fixed on Clara. Dr. Price moved toward her, his hand outstretched, but she waved him away. "No, Malcolm, I have to say it. Uncle Reginald wasn't the man you all think he was. He was cruel, controlling. He threatened to cut me out of his will, to sell the lodge, to leave me with nothing. And he wasn't just hard on me. He was cruel to Eleanor, too." Lady Eleanor's face paled, her hands clenching. "Clara, that's enough," she said sharply. "No, it's not." Clara's voice rose, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I heard you arguing with him, Eleanor, 2 nights ago in the study. You said you'd never forgive him if he sold the lodge. You said it would ruin you." The room erupted in murmurs, Hargreaves' pen pausing mid-note. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said gently, "this argument, what precisely did you hear?" Clara took a shaky breath. "I was passing the study around 10 p.m. Uncle Reginald was shouting, saying he'd do what he wanted with his estate. Eleanor said the lodge was her home, that selling it would humiliate her in society. She said she'd rather see him dead than let him ruin her." Lady Eleanor rose, her face ashen. "That's a lie. I was upset, yes, but I never said that. Clara, how could you twist my words?" Clara shook her head, sobbing. "I'm not lying. I heard you, Eleanor, and I saw you leave the study in tears, slamming the door." Dr. Price stepped forward, his voice urgent. "Clara, you're distraught. You don't know what you're saying. Let me take you to your room." Poirot's voice cut through the chaos, calm but commanding. "Non, Monsieur le Docteur. Mademoiselle Clara will stay. Her words are most illuminating. Madame Eleanor, perhaps you can clarify. What did you say to your husband?" "I was angry, humiliated. But I never threatened him, Mr. Poirot. I loved him, despite everything." Poirot nodded, his pencil moving swiftly. "And these debts, did others know of them? Monsieur Grayson, perhaps?" Grayson, startled, adjusted his pince-nez. "I was aware of financial difficulties, yes. Sir Reginald confided in me about some failed investments. But it was confidential. I told no one." Langston, his composure fraying, interjected. "Debts? That explains why he was so keen to sell my painting. He offered me a tidy sum for it, more than it's worth." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you accepted, Monsieur Langston?" Langston shrugged. "I hadn't decided.
He was pressing me, though. Said he needed the funds quickly. The revelations hung in the air, each guest eyeing the others with renewed suspicion. Hargreaves, seizing the moment, turned to Lady Eleanor. "So, you had motive, Lady Eleanor. Your husband's plan to sell the lodge threatened your status. And you, Mr. Langston, stood to gain from a sale. This button could be yours, couldn't it?" Langston's face darkened. "I told you, it's not mine. I didn't kill him." Clara, trembling, sank back into her chair, Doctor. Price hovering protectively. Mrs. Tuttle, silent until now, spoke up, her voice cold. "Enough of this. You're all accusing each other while the real killer slips through your fingers. Sir Reginald was a hard man, but he didn't deserve this." Poirot's gaze settled on her, his expression unreadable. "Madame Tuttle, your loyalty to Sir Reginald is noted. But tell me, did you ever hear him speak of these debts, or of his plans for the lodge?" Mrs. Tuttle's lips tightened. "He didn't confide in me, Mr. Poirot. I ran his household, not his finances." Poirot nodded, dismissing the group at 3:30 p.m. As they dispersed, he pulled Hastings aside. "Mon ami, Clara's outburst has opened a door. The argument, the debts, the threats. These are not mere lies, but truths twisted by fear. Lady Eleanor conceals her anger, Langston his motives, and Clara her desperation. But the button. This is another red herring, I think, meant to point to Langston." Hastings frowned. "You don't believe it's his?" "I believe," Poirot said, "that the killer is clever, planting clues to mislead. The button, like the rifle, is too convenient. But Clara's words, they reveal a truth we must pursue." By 4 p.m., Poirot requested a private moment with the coroner's full report, delivered that afternoon. The bullet's trajectory confirmed a shot from the trees, likely steadied by a tripod, and the absence of powder residue on Sir Reginald's body suggested a distance of at least 20 yards. Poirot noted the time, 4:15 p.m., and turned to Hastings. "The emotional turning point, Hastings. Clara has shown us the cracks in the facade. Now, we must widen the..."
Lengthening seemed to pulse with secrets, and Hastings knew Poirot was closing in on the killer's identity. Chapter 9. The Trap. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains of Hunter's Lodge, casting a muted glow over the drawing room, where the guests had once again been summoned. It was 4:45 p.m., and the air was thick with anticipation, the weight of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder pressing down like the Dartmoor fog outside. Hercule Poirot, his demeanor calm yet commanding, stood at the center of the room, his small frame radiating an authority that silenced even Inspector Hargreaves' bluster. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt the tension coil tighter, sensing that Poirot was about to spring a trap, a psychological maneuver designed to expose the killer's nerve. The guests, weary and on edge, took their seats with varying degrees of reluctance. Lady Eleanor Haverford sat with her hands clasped tightly, her emerald eyes wary but resolute. Victor Langston lounged against the mantel, his usual charm replaced by a guarded alertness. Dr. Malcolm Price fidgeted with his spectacles, his gaze flickering toward Clara Winthrop, who sat pale and silent, her earlier outburst leaving her drained. Lionel Grayson, the solicitor, clutched his journal, his pince-nez glinting in the dim light. Mrs. Agnes Tuttle stood by the door, her stern face unyielding, while Bates, the gamekeeper, hovered at the edge, his expression a mix of defiance and unease. Inspector Hargreaves, still convinced of Bates's guilt, opened the gathering with a gruff announcement. "We've got the rifle, the button, and enough motive to go around," he said, his eyes sweeping the room. "Someone here knows more than they're saying. I'm giving you one chance to come clean, before we start making arrests." Poirot raised a hand, his voice soft, but cutting through the inspector's bluster. "Pardon, Monsieur l'Inspecteur, but allow Hercule Poirot to conduct a small experiment. The truth, I believe, will reveal itself not through accusations, but through the reactions of those present. I wish to reconstruct the morning of the murder. Here, in this room. Hargreaves frowned, but nodded, intrigued despite himself. Go on then, Mr. Poirot. But I'm watching. Poirot turned to the group, his eyes gleaming with purpose. Mesdames et messieurs, let us imagine the clearing at Blacktor. 8:03 a.m. Sir Reginald stands by the outcrop, his rifle ready. The hunting party is spread out. Lady Eleanor to his left, Monsieur Langston to his right, Dr. Price in the middle, Monsieur Grayson near Captain Hastings, and Monsieur Bates checking traps some distance away. A single shot rings out, and Sir Reginald falls, a bullet through his heart. The shooter, hidden in the trees, has used a tripod for precision. A silk thread, a Turkish cigarette stub. Silk, caught on a branch. Madame Eleanor, you wore a gown of similar shade the night before. Could you have been in the trees, perhaps not to shoot, but to observe? Lady Eleanor's face flushed, but her voice was steady. I've told you, Mr. Poirot, I was in the clearing. I don't know how that thread got there. Poirot nodded, undeterred. And the cigarette? Turkish, fine quality. Monsieur Langston, you are a man of refined tastes. Did you linger in the trees, smoking, before the shot? Langston's eyes narrowed. I don't smoke Turkish cigarettes, Mr. Poirot, and I was nowhere near those trees. Poirot's moustache twitched. And the button, brass, from a hunting coat. Monsieur Bates suggests it resembles yours, Monsieur Langston. Yet you deny losing it. Curious, no? Langston's composure slipped, his voice sharp. I didn't lose a button, and I didn't shoot anyone. You're grasping at straws. Poirot turned to Dr. Price, his tone gentle but probing. Monsieur le Docteur, your digitalis intrigues me. A drug that affects the heart, carried by a man who claims no knowledge of Sir Reginald's health. Were you perhaps treating him in secret? Price's hands trembled, his spectacles slipping. I've said it before, I didn't treat him. The digitalis is for my village patients. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara. Mademoiselle Winthrop, your letter to your uncle spoke of ruin. You overheard an argument between Sir Reginald and Lady Eleanor, and you confided in Dr. Price. Did you, in your distress, act to protect your future? Clara's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. No, Mr. Poirot. I loved my uncle even if he was cruel. I could never hurt him. Finally, Poirot addressed Grayson and Mrs. Tuttle. Monsieur Grayson, you knew of Sir Reginald's debts, yet kept them secret. Did these debts threaten your own interests? And Madame Tuttle, your loyalty to Sir Reginald is profound, yet you heard the argument. Did you know of his plans to sell the lodge? Grayson adjusted his pince-nez, his voice calm. My interests were professional, Mr. Poirot. I advised him as a solicitor, nothing more. Mrs. Tuttle, her face like stone, said simply, I served Sir Reginald. His plans were his own. Poirot stepped back, spreading his hands. And so we have a puzzle. A rifle in a tree, a button, a thread, a cigarette, all pointing to different suspects, yet none conclusive. But let us consider the tripod mark, the true clue. It tells us the killer planned, waited, anything at all, to speak. The truth will come, whether you will it or not. The room was silent, the tension palpable. Then Dr. Price stood, his face pale, his voice shaking. I can't bear this any longer, he said. I didn't kill Sir Reginald, but I knew about the debts. Clara told me, and I confronted him the night before the hunt. I begged him to reconsider, for her sake. He laughed at me, said I was meddling in matters beyond my station.
The admission hung in the air, a crack in the facade. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth.
Malcolm, why didn't you tell me?
Price turned to her, his eyes pleading.
I wanted to protect you, Clara.
You were so fragile, and he was so cruel.
I thought if I could reason with him.
Poirot interrupted, his voice sharp.
And this confrontation, Monsieur le Docteur, where did it take place?
Price hesitated.
In the study, around 9:30 p.m.
No one else was there. Poirot's eyes gleamed.
And yet, Madame Tuttle heard raised voices at 10 p.m. between Sir Reginald and Lady Eleanor. Your timing, Doctor, is most interesting.
Price flushed, stammering.
I may have misremembered the time.
It was late. Hargreaves seized the moment. So, you argued with the victim hours before his death. That's motive and opportunity, Doctor. Price shook his head vehemently. I didn't kill him, I swear it. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough, mes amis. The trap has been set, and the truth begins to stir. Dr. Price's confession is a step, but not the destination. The killer is clever, but they cannot hide forever. As the guests dispersed at 6 p.m., their faces etched with unease, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. Mon ami, the doctor's admission is significant, but it is not the whole truth. He conceals something, perhaps to protect Clara, perhaps himself. The tripod mark, the thread, the cigarette, these are the work of a mind that plans, not a man who argues in haste. Hastings frowned. You think Price is lying about the argument? Not lying, Poirot said, but omitting. The timing of his confrontation does not align with Mrs. Tuttle's account. Someone else was in that study, and the argument was more than a plea. We are close, Hastings. The killer feels the net tightening. By 6:30 p.m., the lodge was quiet, the guests retreating to their rooms under Hargreaves' watchful eye. Poirot, in the library, spread out his notes, the clues forming a pattern only he could see. The trap is set, Hastings, he said, his voice low. Tomorrow we shall spring it, and the killer will have nowhere to hide. Hastings, noting the time, 6:45 p.m.
Ancient manner. By 8 a.m., the guests were summoned to the drawing room, their faces etched with a mixture of dread and anticipation. The Dartmoor mist pressed against the windows, mirroring the fog of uncertainty that had enveloped the household since Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, stood before the assembled party, his small stature commanding the room with an authority born of intellect. Captain Arthur Hastings, at his side, felt the weight of the moment. This was the climax, the point where Poirot's little grey cells would unravel the intricate web of lies and clues to reveal the killer. Inspector Hargreaves, his confidence shaken by the mounting complexities, stood near the fireplace, his notebook open, but his expression one of reluctant deference to Poirot. The guests, Lady Eleanor Haverford, Victor Langston, Dr. Malcolm Price, Clara Winthrop, Lionel Grayson, Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, and Bates, sat or stood in a tense semicircle, their eyes fixed on the diminutive detective. The clues, the tripod mark, the silk thread, the Turkish cigarette stub, Clara's letter, the unfinished will, the overheard arguments, the painting, the brass button, and Dr. Price's confession had built a labyrinth of suspicion, and now Poirot was ready to guide them to its heart. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and measured. We stand at the threshold of truth. Sir Reginald Haverford was murdered at 8:03 a.m., shot through the heart in the clearing at Black Tor. The act was no accident, no impulse. It was a crime of precision, planned with care. The clues, so carefully placed, were meant to mislead, but Hercule Poirot sees through the deception. Let us reconstruct the crime and reveal the killer. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back.
First, the scene. Sir Reginald stood by the outcrop, his rifle unfired. A single shot, from a distance, struck his heart. The tripod mark tells us the shooter used a rest for accuracy, suggesting preparation. The silk thread, blue and fine, caught in the trees, points to a lady's presence, perhaps Madame Eleanor's. The Turkish cigarette stub suggests a man of refined tastes, such as Monsieur Langston. The brass button from a hunting coat implicates him further, and the rifle, hidden in a hollow tree, bears the monogram R.H., Sir Reginald's own. But these clues, mes amis, are a tapestry of misdirection. Poirot paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Let us consider the motives. Sir Reginald planned to sell Hunter's Lodge and revise his will, threatening Mademoiselle Clara's security. She wrote a letter, pleading with him, and confided in Dr. Price. Madame Eleanor argued with her husband, fearing the loss of her social standing. Monsieur Grayson knew of Sir Reginald's debts, which endangered his financial stability.
Madame Eleanor. Madame Tuttle, loyal but silent, heard the arguments. And Monsieur Bates, the gamekeeper, knows the woods where the rifle was hidden. Each of you had reason to wish Sir Reginald gone. Hargreaves shifted impatiently. Get to the point, Mr. Poirot. Who's the killer? Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. Patience, Inspector. The truth requires method. Let us examine the clues anew. The rifle in the tree was meant to implicate Bates, but its monogram suggests it was Sir Reginald's, placed to mislead. The button, too, is convenient. Too convenient. Monsieur Langston's coat is intact, yet the button was found near the tripod. The cigarette stub, Turkish and rare, could belong to Langston. But why leave it behind? The silk thread, matching Madame Eleanor's gown, suggests her presence in the trees, yet she denies it. And Dr. Price's digitalis, his nervous confession. These point to guilt, but not of murder. He turned to Clara, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle Clara, your outburst yesterday was a turning point. You revealed the argument between Sir Reginald and Madame Eleanor, and Dr. Price's confrontation with your uncle. But you omitted something, no? You were in the study that night, after Madame Eleanor left. Clara's face paled, her hands trembling. I didn't want to say. I went to see Uncle Reginald after their argument, around 10:15 p.m. I begged him not to sell the lodge. He was furious, said I was ungrateful. I left in tears. Poirot nodded. And you told Dr. Price, who confronted Sir Reginald earlier, at 9:30 p.m. But there was another visitor that night, one who has not spoken. He turned to Mrs. Tuttle, whose stern expression faltered. Madame Tuttle, you heard raised voices at 10 p.m., but you also saw someone enter the study later, around 10:30 p.m. Who was it? Mrs. Tuttle's lips tightened, but under Poirot's gaze, she relented. It was Mr. Langston. I saw him go in, looking agitated. He stayed only a few minutes. Langston started, his face darkening. That's nonsense. I never went to the study that night. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, Madame Tuttle is precise. You went to Sir Reginald, perhaps to discuss the painting, or something more personal. Your feelings for Madame Eleanor were no secret to him, were they? Lady Eleanor gasped, her composure cracking. That's absurd. Victor and I are acquaintances. Nothing more. Poirot raised a hand. Let us piece it together. The night before the murder, Sir Reginald argued with Madame Eleanor about the lodge, then with Dr. Price about Clara, then with Clara herself. Finally, Monsieur Langston visited, driven by jealousy or ambition. The next morning, Sir Reginald is shot, and the clues point in every direction. But one clear opportunity. He turned to Dr. Price, whose face had gone ashen. Monsieur le Docteur, you are a man of science, trained in precision. You knew of Sir Reginald's plans, and your devotion to Mademoiselle Clara drove you to act. You stood in the trees, using a tripod to steady your aim, firing the shot that killed him. The rifle in the tree, the button, the cigarette, these were your attempts to mislead, to point to Bates or Langston. Price stood, trembling, his voice breaking. "No, I didn't. I couldn't." Poirot's voice was relentless. "You argued with Sir Reginald, knowing he would ruin Clara. You took his rifle, set up the tripod, and fired. The silk thread was a mistake, perhaps from Clara's shawl, borrowed in your haste. The cigarette, a Turkish brand you smoked to calm your nerves, the button, from your own coat, planted to implicate Langston. You planned it all, but you could not plan for Hercule Poirot." Price collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. I did it for Clara. He was going to destroy her, leave her penniless. I loved her, and he laughed at me. I couldn't let him hurt her." Clara sobbed, reaching for him. "Malcolm, no." Hargreaves stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Dr. Malcolm Price, you're under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford." As Price was led away, the room erupted in murmurs. Lady Eleanor's face was a mask of shock, Langston's expression one of relief, and Clara's grief palpable. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "The heart, Hastings, is the key." Price's love for Clara drove him to murder, but his cleverness could not outwit the little grey cells. By 9:30 a.m. the lodge was quiet, the truth laid bare. Poirot's trap had worked, exposing the killer through the pressure of revelation. The guests dispersed, their secrets exposed, their lives forever changed. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning mist over Dartmoor had begun to lift by 10 a.m., revealing the stark beauty of the moors that surrounded Hunter's Lodge. Inside, the atmosphere was one of quiet desolation, the revelation of Dr. Malcolm Price's guilt casting a pall over the household. The drawing room, once a stage for polite civility, now felt like a hollow shell, its occupants grappling with the aftermath of truth. Hercule Poirot, his work complete, stood by the window, his small frame silhouetted against the pale light, his expression one of serene contemplation. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated nearby, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and melancholy, knowing that Poirot's triumph was tempered by his deep understanding of human frailty.
Library. Sketching absently, as if to anchor himself. Clara Winthrop, devastated by Dr. Price's confession, remained under the care of a maid, her sobs echoing faintly through the corridors. Lionel Grayson, ever the meticulous solicitor, was already drafting letters to manage the legal fallout of Sir Reginald's death. Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, her stern facade softened by the morning's events, oversaw the servants with a quieter authority, while Bates, cleared of suspicion, returned to his duties on the estate. Inspector Hargreaves, preparing to escort Dr. Price to the village for formal charges, approached Poirot with a grudging respect. "You've done it again, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice gruff. "I was sure it was Bates, but you saw through the lot of them. That business with the tripod mark. Clever, I'll give you that." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching slightly. "Merci, Inspector. But it is not cleverness alone, no? It is the method, the observation of the human heart. Dr. Price's love for Mademoiselle Clara was his undoing, as love so often is." Hargreaves nodded, then turned to his constables, barking orders to prepare the motor car. As he left, Poirot beckoned Hastings to join him in the library, where the fire crackled softly, offering a semblance of warmth against the morning's chill. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, settling into a leather armchair. "This case has been a study in the complexities of human nature. The clues, the tripod, the thread, the cigarette, the button, were but shadows cast by the true motive, love, twisted into desperation.
Dr. Price believed he could save Mademoiselle Clara by removing Sir Reginald, but he underestimated the power of truth. Hastings, stirring the fire, frowned. It's tragic, Poirot. Clara's lost everything now. Her uncle, her security, and the man who loved her. Do you think she suspected Price? Poirot's eyes softened. No, Hastings. Her grief was genuine, her shock complete. She saw Dr. Price as her protector, not her uncle's killer. But the heart is blind, and love can obscure even the most obvious truths. Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the other guests. And Lady Eleanor? She seemed so composed, yet Clara's accusation about their argument suggested deeper resentments. Oui, Poirot said, his fingers steepled. Madame Eleanor's anger was real, but it was not murderous. Her concern was her status. Her pride, the silk thread, I suspect, was indeed hers. A moment of carelessness, perhaps, as she wandered near the trees, driven by curiosity or suspicion. But she did not fire the shot. Her heart was wounded, not vengeful. And Langston, Hastings asked, that painting, the cigarette stub, were they just distractions?
Careless habit left to mislead. The button, however, was planted by Dr. Price, a clever attempt to shift blame. Langston's sin was not murder, but indiscretion. Hastings leaned back, processing Poirot's words. And Grayson's notes, Mrs. Tuttle's silence, what of them? Grayson, Poirot said, is a man of order. His notes a shield against chaos. He knew of Sir Reginald's debts. But his loyalty was to his profession, not to violence. Madame Tuttle, she carries her own grief. The photograph of her son, lost in the war. Her silence was not complicity, but protection of the lodger's dignity. Each played their part, but only Dr. Price crossed the line. The clock struck 11 a.m., and Poirot rose, smoothing his suit. Come, Hastings, let us walk the grounds. The air will clear our minds. They stepped into the courtyard, the moor stretching before them, its rugged beauty a stark contrast to the tragedy within. Poirot paused by a stone bench, his gaze distant. This case, Hastings, reminds us of the fragility of the human soul. Dr. Price acted out of love, but love without reason becomes destruction. Hercule Poirot solves the crime, oui, but he cannot mend the hearts broken by it. Hastings, moved by Poirot's words, nodded. You always see the bigger picture, Poirot. I'd have been lost in the clues. The rifle, the button, all of it. Poirot chuckled softly. The clues, Hastings, are but the surface. The truth lies beneath, in the motives, the passions, the silences. It is why I, Hercule Poirot, rely on the little grey cells. They see what the eyes cannot. As they walked back towards the lodge, the sound of a motor car announced Hargreaves' departure with Dr. Price. The remaining guests began to prepare for their own exits. The lodger's future uncertain. Lady Eleanor would inherit, but the debts loomed large, and Clara's prospects were dim. Langston, Grayson, and Mrs. Tuttle would return to their lives, forever marked by the events at Hunter's Lodge. At 11:45 a.m., Poirot and Hastings packed their bags, their time at the lodge drawing to a close. As they awaited their car to the station, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice reflective. Life, Hastings, is a mystery greater than any crime. We solve one puzzle, only to find another waiting. But for now, our work here is done. The car arrived at noon, and as they drove away from Hunter's Lodge, the manor receded into the mist. Its secrets laid bare, but its shadows enduring. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose eyes were fixed on the horizon, already contemplating the next challenge. The case of the forest fatality was closed, but Poirot's philosophy, that truth, however painful, must always be sought. Roads treacherous. By 12:30 p.m., they had returned to the library.
their bags packed, but their car unable to navigate the muddy tracks. The lodge, though quieter now with Dr. Malcolm Price in custody, still hummed with an undercurrent of unease. The guests, preparing to leave, lingered in their rooms or drifted through the corridors, their faces marked by the strain of the past days. Poirot, ever alert, sensed that the resolution of the case had not fully dispelled the shadows of doubt that clung to Hunter's Lodge. Hastings, seated by the library fire, glanced at Poirot, who was reviewing his notebook with a furrowed brow. "You seem troubled, Poirot," he ventured. "Price confessed, the clues aligned. Surely the case is closed." Poirot closed his notebook with a sigh, his eyes distant. "Mon ami, the confession of Doctor. Price is convincing, oui, but the mind of Hercule Poirot is not at ease. There is a detail, a small inconsistency that nags at me. The tapestry is complete, yet one thread remains loose." Hastings frowned. "What inconsistency?" "The tripod mark, the silk thread, the cigarette stub, all pointed to Price. His motive was clear, and he broke under your pressure." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Précisément, Hastings. He broke too easily, perhaps. And the silk thread, blue, fine, matching Madame Eleanor's gown, yet found in the trees where Price stood. Why would he carry such a thread? And the cigarette stub, Turkish, yes, but Doctor. Price is not a smoker, as far as we know. These clues, they fit, but they also jar." Before Hastings could respond, a knock at the door announced Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, her stern face softer than usual. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I must speak with you. It's about something I didn't mention before." Poirot gestured for her to sit, his eyes keen. "Madame Tuttle, you have been the silent observer of this house. What have you kept from us?" She hesitated, her hands smoothing her apron. "The night before Sir Reginald's death, I saw more than I told you. After Mr. Langston left the study, around 10:30 p.m., I heard another visitor. It was Mademoiselle Clara, but she wasn't alone. Dr. Price was with her. They were whispering, urgent-like, outside the study door. I couldn't hear the words, but Clara was crying, and Dr. Price seemed angry." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you did not mention this before, madame?" "Why?" Mrs. Tuttle's lip.
Hastings, his expression grave. "This changes much, Hastings. Dr. Price's confession spoke of a confrontation at 9:30 p.m., alone. Yet Madame Tuttle places him with Clara at 10:45 p.m., after her own visit to the study. Why did he omit this?" Hastings frowned. "You think he's protecting Clara? But she was devastated by his confession. She couldn't have been involved." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but the heart is complex. Let us speak with Mademoiselle Clara once more." They found Clara in her room at 1:15 p.m., her eyes red from crying. A maid hovering nearby. Poirot dismissed the maid and spoke gently. "Mademoiselle, a small matter. The night before your uncle's death, you visited his study at 10:15 p.m., but you were seen later, with Dr. Price, outside the study at 10:45 p.m. What passed between you?" Clara's face crumpled, her voice trembling. I didn't want to say. Malcolm, Dr. Price, came to me after I argued with Uncle Reginald. I was upset, crying. He wanted to confront Uncle again, to plead for me, but I begged him not to. We stood outside the study, whispering.
because I didn't want anyone to hear. He was so angry at Uncle, but I made him promise not to do anything rash." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And did he keep this promise, mademoiselle?" Clara nodded, tears falling. "I thought he did. He said he'd let it go for my sake. But now I don't know." Poirot thanked her, his expression unreadable, and led Hastings back to the library. "The picture shifts, Hastings," he said. "Dr. Price's confession is incomplete. He protects Clara, yes, but perhaps also himself. The silk thread, could it be hers, not Madame Eleanor's? And the cigarette stub, perhaps a plant, not by Price, but by another." Hastings's eyes widened. "You think someone else is involved? But who?" Poirot paced, his fingers steepled. "Let us reconsider the clues. The tripod mark proves planning, but the thread and cigarette suggest a second hand. Madame Eleanor's gown is a convenient match, but Clara wore a shawl that night, blue, silk, I recall, and Langston, with his Turkish cigarettes, was in the study earlier. What if the killer had an accomplice or a rival, muddying the waters?" At 2 p.m., Poirot requested a meeting with Victor Langston, whose agitation was palpable. "Monsieur Langston," Poirot said, "you visited Sir Reginald at 10:30 p.m. after his argument with Madame Eleanor. You claimed it was about the painting. But was there more? A confrontation, perhaps, about your feelings for his wife?" Langston's face darkened. "I told you it was business. He wanted the study.
Someone must have taken it, planted it." Poirot nodded, dismissing him. "The net widens, Hastings," he said. "Langston's denial is plausible, but his presence in the study adds a layer. And Clara's shawl. We must examine it." They found the shawl in Clara's room, a delicate blue silk with a frayed edge. Poirot held it up, noting a missing thread that matched the one from the trees. "This, Hastings, is no coincidence. Clara was near the trees, perhaps with Price, or perhaps alone." By 3 p.m., Poirot requested a final word with Lady Eleanor, whose composure was fraying. "Madame," he said, "you argued with your husband, but you did not mention Clara's presence that night, or Dr. Price's. Did you know of their conversation outside the study?" Lady Eleanor's eyes flickered. I heard voices, yes, after I left the study. I thought it was Clara, pleading again. I didn't know Dr. Price was with her." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And your gown, madame, did you wear it that night, near the trees, perhaps to overhear?" She shook her head. "No, Mr. Poirot. I stayed in my room after the argument, I swear it." As she left, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "The shadows of doubt remain, Hastings. Dr. Price's confession covers much, but not all. Clara's shawl, Langston's cigarette, Eleanor's silence. There is another hand at work, perhaps guiding Price, perhaps betraying him. We must watch closely." By 4 p.m., the rain had eased, and the car was ready. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave, the lodge seemed to hold its breath, its secrets not fully dispelled. Hastings, noting the time, felt the weight of Poirot's unease. The case was closed, yet a lingering doubt suggested that Hunter's Lodge still harbored a truth waiting to be uncovered. The unraveling thread. The drizzle over Dartmoor had softened to a faint mist by 4:30 p.m., casting Hunter's Lodge in a spectral haze that mirrored the lingering doubts in Hercule Poirot's mind. The car to the station waited in the courtyard, but Poirot,
ever reluctant to leave a puzzle incomplete, lingered in the library, his notebook open, his sharp eyes tracing the lines of his meticulous notes. Captain Arthur Hastings, sensing his friend's unease, stood by the window, watching the moors fade into twilight. The confession of Dr. Malcolm Price had closed the case for Inspector Hargreaves, but Poirot's disquiet suggested that the truth was not as neatly resolved as it appeared.
Admitted to the murder, Poirot. He had motive, opportunity, and the clues point to him. What's missing? Poirot's moustache twitched. What is missing, Hastings, is the why of the clues. The silk thread from Mademoiselle Clara's shawl, not Madame Eleanor's gown. The Turkish cigarette, which Monsieur Langston smokes, but which Price does not. The tripod mark, precise and planned, yet the button and rifle seem planted to mislead. Someone else was in those woods, or knew of Price's plan. We must find this person. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. Mrs. Agnes Tuttle entered, her stern face softened by a flicker of hesitation. "Mr. Poirot," she said, "I've been thinking on what you said about the truth coming out. There's something else I saw the morning of the murder. I didn't think it mattered, but it's been weighing on me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Speak, Madame Tuttle." "Every detail is a piece of the puzzle." She took a breath, her hands clasped tightly. At 7:45 a.m., just before the hunting party returned, I was in the kitchen, looking out the window. I saw someone moving toward the woods near Black Tor. It was quick, just a shadow, but they wore a dark coat, like Mr. Langston's. I thought it was him, but I couldn't be sure. Poirot leaned forward. "And this figure, did they carry anything? A rifle, perhaps?" Mrs. Tuttle shook her head. "I couldn't tell. The mist was thick, and they were gone in a moment." Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. "This is most significant, Madame Tuttle. A figure in the woods before the shot. It suggests another presence, perhaps watching, perhaps aiding." As Mrs. Tuttle left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "We must speak with Monsieur Langston again. His cigarette, his coat, his visit to the study. These threads weave around him." They found Langston in the drawing room at 5 p.m., sketching by the fire, his expression guarded. "Monsieur Langston," Poirot began, his tone deceptively mild, "you have been less than forthcoming. A witness saw a figure in a dark coat like yours near Black Tor at 7:45 a.m., and your cigarette stub was found where the shot was fired. Explain, s'il vous plaît." Langston's pencil stilled, his eyes narrowing. "I told you, I was in the clearing, not the woods. I smoked in my room the night before, but not that morning. Someone's setting me up, Mr. Poirot, planting that stub. Maybe that button, too." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And your visit to Sir Reginald's study at 10:30 p.m. You spoke of the painting, but was there more?" "Admitted. Said he needed quick cash, which is why he wanted my painting. I didn't think much of it, his business, not mine." As Langston left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "He speaks truth, but not all of it. The cigarette is his, I am certain, but whether he dropped it or another did, we must confirm." At 5:30 p.m., Poirot requested Clara's shawl again, examining it closely in the library's lamplight. The frayed edge, where the thread had been torn, matched the one from the trees perfectly. "This shawl, Hastings," he said, "places Clara near the scene, or someone who borrowed it. Dr. Price, perhaps, to cover his tracks, or another who wished to implicate her." Hastings frowned. "You think Clara was involved? She was in her room, wasn't she?" "Or so she claims," Poirot said.
But her presence with Price outside the study, her shawl's thread in the trees, these suggest she knew more than she admitted. Let us speak with her. They found Clara in her room at 6 p.m., her face pale but composed. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "your shawl's thread was found in the trees where the shot was fired. Were you there, perhaps with Dr. Price, or did someone take your shawl?" Clara's eyes widened, her hands twisting her handkerchief. "My shawl? I wore it the night before when I spoke to Uncle Reginald. I left it in the study, I think. I didn't go to the woods, I swear it." Poirot's expression softened. "And Dr. Price, did he have access to your shawl?" She nodded, tears welling. "He was with me that night. He could have taken it, but why? He said he did it for me, but I never asked him to." Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. As they returned to the library, he spread out his notes: the tripod mark, the silk thread, the cigarette stub, the button, the rifle, the study visits, and now Mrs. Tuttle's sighting of a figure in a dark coat. "The pattern emerges, Hastings," he said. "Dr. Price fired the shot, but another knew of his plan, perhaps aided, perhaps betrayed him. The shawl's thread, the cigarette, these were not his doing." At 6:30 p.m., Poirot requested a final meeting with Lady Eleanor, whose composure was now a brittle mask. "Madame," he said, "you heard voices outside the study that night, Clara and Dr. Price. Did you see anyone else, perhaps Monsieur Langston or another?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her eyes flickering. I saw Mr. Grayson, briefly, near the study around 10:45 p.m. He was leaving, looking agitated. I thought he'd been speaking with Reginald, but I didn't ask."
Study. He is the shadow we seek. He knew of Price's plan, perhaps encouraged it to protect his own interests. By 7 p.m., Poirot confronted Grayson in the drawing room. "Monsieur Grayson," he said, "you were near the study at 10:45 p.m., after Dr. Price and Clara. Did you overhear their plan, or did you have your own?" Grayson's pince-nez slipped, his face paling. I was checking on Sir Reginald's papers. He asked me to review his will that night. I heard voices, yes, but I didn't interfere." Poirot's voice was sharp. "And yet you said nothing. You knew of the debts, the will, the tensions. Did you plant the cigarette, the button, to ensure Dr. Price took the blame?" Grayson stammered, "No, I'm a solicitor, not a murderer." Poirot nodded, dismissing him. "The thread unravels, Hastings," he said. "Grayson is not the killer, but he is complicit in silence. He knew, and he let it happen. As night fell, the lodge remained a cauldron of secrets." Poirot, noting the time, 7:30 p.m., prepared to leave, but the shadow of doubt lingered. The truth was near, but one final piece remained. Chapter 14. The Final Confrontation. The evening of the third day at Hunter's Lodge descended with a quiet intensity, the mist outside thickening into a veil that seemed to mirror the unresolved threads of the mystery within. By 8 p.m., the guests had gathered once more in the drawing room, their faces drawn with fatigue and apprehension. Hercule Poirot, his demeanor calm but his eyes alight with purpose, stood before them, his small frame commanding the room. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the fireplace, felt the weight of the moment. This was Poirot's final act, the culmination of his relentless pursuit of truth. The confession of Dr. Malcolm Price had not fully satisfied Poirot's meticulous mind, and the lingering doubts about Lionel Grayson's silence, Clara Winthrop's shawl, and Victor Langston's cigarette stub demanded resolution. Inspector Hargreaves,
preparing to depart with Dr. Price in custody, lingered in the room, his notebook in hand, his expression a mix of curiosity and impatience. The guests, Lady Eleanor Haverford, Victor Langston, Clara Winthrop, Lionel Grayson, and Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, sat or stood in a tense circle, their eyes fixed on Poirot. Bates, the gamekeeper, had been dismissed to his duties, his innocence now accepted. The clues, the tripod mark, the silk thread, the Turkish cigarette stub, the brass button, the hidden rifle, Clara's letter, the overheard arguments, Langston's painting, and Grayson's late-night presence near the study, had woven a complex web, and Poirot was ready to cut through its final strands.
Reginald. The tripod mark confirms his precision, the rifle his means. Yet the silk thread from Mademoiselle Clara's shawl, the Turkish cigarette, the brass button, these suggest another hand, one that knew of his plan and sought to shape its outcome. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal the full truth. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us revisit the night before the murder. Sir Reginald argued with Madame Eleanor at 10 p.m., then with Mademoiselle Clara at 10:15 p.m. Dr. Price confronted him at 9:30 p.m., and later, with Clara, whispered outside the study at 10:45 p.m. Monsieur Langston visited at 10:30 p.m., and Monsieur Grayson was seen nearby at 10:45 p.m. A busy night, no? But one figure emerges from the shadows. Monsieur Grayson, the solicitor, whose silence speaks louder than words. Grayson's face paled, his pince-nez slipping. Mr. Poirot, I've told you. I was reviewing papers. I had no part in this. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. Patience, monsieur. Let us examine the clues anew. The silk thread, from Mademoiselle Clara's shawl, was found in the trees where the shot was fired. Dr. Price could have taken it, but why? To implicate Clara? No, he loved her. The cigarette stub, Turkish, matches Monsieur Langston's brand. Yet he denies smoking in the woods. The brass button, from a hunting coat, points to him, but his coat is intact. And the rifle, hidden in the tree, bears Sir Reginald's monogram. Too convenient. Too perfect. He turned to Clara, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle, your shawl was left in the study that night. Did anyone else have access to it? Clara's eyes widened, her voice trembling. I don't know. Malcolm, Dr. Price, was with me. He could have taken it, but I didn't see him. Poirot nodded, then faced Langston. Monsieur Langston, your cigarette stub was found where the shot was fired. You claim it was planted. By whom? Langston's jaw tightened. I don't know, but it wasn't me. I smoked in my room, not the woods. Poirot's gaze shifted to Grayson. And you, Monsieur Grayson, knew of Sir Reginald's debts and his plan to revise his will. You were near the study at 10:45 p.m., after Dr. Price and Clara. Did you overhear their plan to confront Sir Reginald, or perhaps something more? Grayson's hands trembled, his voice sharp. I overheard nothing. I was there to collect documents, as I said. You're twisting facts, Mr. Poirot. Poirot's eyes gleamed. No, monsieur. I am untwisting them. The truth is this. Dr. Price planned the murder, driven by his love for Clara and her fear of ruin. But you face ashen. That's absurd. I'm no accomplice to murder. Poirot's voice was relentless. You are a man of detail, Monsieur Grayson, yet you kept silent about what you heard. Why? Because Sir Reginald's death served your interests. His debts threatened your reputation as his solicitor. You had mismanaged his investments, no? A dead client cannot expose your failures. You saw Dr. Price's desperation and let it unfold, planting the cigarette and button to shift blame. The room gasped.
Lady Eleanor's hand flying to her mouth, Langston's eyes narrowing, and Clara sobbing softly. Hargreaves stepped forward, his voice gruff. "Is this true, Mr. Grayson? Did you aid and abet?" Grayson collapsed into his chair, his voice breaking. "I didn't plan it." "I heard Price and Clara talking. Price said he'd deal with Sir Reginald. I thought he meant another argument, not murder. The next morning when I heard the shot, I realized. I found the cigarette in Langston's room and the button from an old coat in the lodge. I placed them to protect myself, to confuse things." Poirot nodded, his expression somber. "You did not fire the shot, Monsieur Grayson, but your silence and your actions made you complicit. You allowed a murderer to act and sought to hide his crime." Hargreaves signaled to his constable. "Lionel Grayson, you're under arrest for aiding and abetting a felony." As Grayson was led away, his head bowed, the room fell silent. Clara's sobs were the only sound, her grief for Dr. Price, now compounded by Grayson's betrayal. Lady Eleanor, her face pale, rose and left without a word. Langston, his expression a mix of relief and disgust, followed. Mrs. Tuttle, her stern facade restored, began directing the servants to prepare tea, as if routine could mend the fractures. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "The tapestry is complete, Hastings. Dr. Price was the hand that killed, but Grayson was the shadow that guided. His greed and fear wove the final threads of deception." Hastings, noting the time, 9 p.m., felt the weight of the resolution. "You saw it all, Poirot. The clues, the motives, the silences. But what of Clara? She's lost everything." Poirot's eyes softened. "Her heart is broken, oui, but she is young. She will find strength. The truth, however painful, sets us free." As the guests dispersed, the lodge seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart, the car now ready in the clearing mist. The final confrontation had revealed not just the killer, but the complicity of silence, and Poirot's little gray cells had triumphed once more. 15. The departure. The mist over Dartmoor had cleared by the morning of the 4th day.
Prepared to depart. The car, its engine humming softly, stood ready to carry them to the station, where a train would take them back to London. The lodge, though still grand in its granite austerity, felt diminished, its secrets exposed, and its inhabitants forever altered by the truth of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. Poirot, immaculate in his overcoat and Homburg hat, stood by the car, his small suitcase at his feet. His green eyes surveyed the lodge one last time, as if committing its every detail to memory. Hastings, beside him, felt a mix of relief and melancholy. The case had been solved. Dr. Malcolm Price's confession and Lionel Grayson's complicity laid bare, but the cost was heavy. Clara Winthrop's grief, Lady Eleanor's isolation, and the fractured lives of those left behind lingered like the fading mist. Inside, the remaining guests were packing, their departures imminent. Lady Eleanor Haverford, now the sole mistress of the lodge, had retreated to her room, her future uncertain amid Sir Reginald's debts. Victor Langston, his charm subdued, was preparing to return to his studio, his painting of the lodge unfinished and likely unwanted. Clara, under the care of a solicitous maid, faced a life without the security she had clung to. Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, ever dutiful, oversaw the household's final preparations, her stern facade masking her own private sorrow. Bates, the gamekeeper, had resumed his work on the moors, his name cleared, but his loyalty to the Haverford estate unshaken. Inspector Hargreaves, having overseen the arrests of Dr. Price and Grayson, approached Poirot in the courtyard, his gruff demeanor softened by grudging admiration. "You've done a fine job, Mr. Poirot," he said, extending a hand. I'd have locked up Bates and called it a day. But you saw the whole picture. Price, Grayson, the lot. Those clues, the tripod, the thread, the cigarette. They were devilishly clever. Poirot shook his hand, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. Merci, Inspector. But it is not the clues alone, no? It is the human heart, the motives, the silences, that reveals the truth. Hercule Poirot merely arranges the pieces. Hargreaves nodded, then turned to his motor car, where his constables awaited. As he drove off, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression reflective. Come, mon ami. Let us take a final walk before we leave. The air of Dartmoor will clear the mind. They strolled toward the edge of the courtyard, the moors stretching before them in rugged splendor. Poirot paused by a stone wall, his gaze distant. This case, Hastings, was a study in the frailties of humanity. Dr. Price, driven by love, committed murder. Monsieur Grayson, driven by fear, became complicit. Mademoiselle Clara, Madame Clara, she's lost so much. Do you think she'll recover? Poirot's eyes softened. She is young, Hastings, and the heart is resilient. She will mourn, oui, but she will find her way. The lodge, with its debts and shadows, may no longer be her home, but she has strength she does not yet know. And Lady Eleanor? Hastings asked. She seemed so cold. Yet you said her anger wasn't murderous. Précisément, Poirot said. Her pride was wounded, her status threatened, but her heart did not seek death. The silk thread, I believe, was a coincidence, perhaps caught in the trees during an earlier walk. Her silence was her shield, not her guilt. Hastings glanced back at the lodge, its chimneys stark against the sky. And Langston? His cigarette, his painting, were they just distractions? Poirot chuckled softly. Monsieur Langston is a romantic, Hastings, but not a killer. His cigarette was taken by Grayson, a clever plant to muddy the waters. His painting revealed his heart, not his crime. As for Madame Tuttle, her silence was born of loyalty and loss. Her son's photograph a reminder of her own pain. They returned to the car, the driver loading their bags. Poirot paused, his hand on the door, and looked at Hastings. This case, mon ami, reminds us that truth is a double-edged sword. It brings justice, but also pain. Dr. Price acted out of love, Grayson out of fear, yet both betrayed themselves. Hercule Poirot solves the mystery, but he cannot heal the wounds. Hastings, noting the time, 9:45 a.m., felt the weight of Poirot's words. You always see the human side, Poirot. I'd have been lost in the clues, the tripod, the button, all of it. Poirot's smile was wistful. The clues, Hastings, are but the surface. The truth lies in the heart, its passions, its fears, its silences. That is why I, Hercule Poirot, rely on the little grey cells. They see what the eyes cannot. As they climbed into the car, the lodge receded behind them, its granite walls fading into the moorland mist. The driver navigated the winding tracks, and Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose eyes were fixed on the horizon, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The case of the forest fatality was closed, its secrets laid bare, but the echoes of its tragedy would linger in the hearts of those who remained. By 10:15 a.m., they reached the village station, the train's whistle sounding in the distance. Poirot adjusted his hat, his demeanor serene. Life, Hastings, is a series of mysteries, each more complex than the last. We solve one, only to find another waiting. But for now, we return to London, where the little grey cells will rest, until the next call to truth. As the train, justice had been served, even if the cost was steep. The mystery was solved, the truth revealed, and Hercule Poirot, the master of the little grey cells, rode on to the next adventure.